the recording and share the screen. So, thank you. So, welcome to our program called Shine a Light on Anti-Semitism. And this is part of a nationwide Shine a Light program. This is kind of a hastily arranged program. I see Sherry Dukovsky, our executive director, has joined us. It was pretty last minute put together to stress teaching and understanding about anti-Semitism in connection with the holiday of Hanukkah. A lot of different federations, I think most of these are going through federations, but many different groups around the country and in Canada are hosting all kinds of different programs. This is ours. We'll have 6 brief, and I know those of you who know me very well will chuckle at the word brief in anything I do. Zoom discussions tonight through next Thursday. Friday night, we will take Shabbat off and reconvene on Saturday night. And then our closing program, sorry for all the folks that are joining from around the country. I know we have some New Yorkers here. We have people from New Jersey. We have people from Texas. But a week from tonight, actually this afternoon, I'll give you the details in a moment, we're having a community celebration of Hanukkah at the collection shopping area in Oxnard. Here's how the Zoom link will work, or the Zoom discussions will work. You will need the Zoom link. If you registered, you got the Zoom link sent to you, and the fact that you're here means it seems to be working. And I haven't gotten any panicked emails yet, although I'm going to keep an eye on my, I did get a message. I'll keep an eye on my cell phone to see if anybody is having a problem. No. And so you need that Zoom link, and I am actually going to paste it into the chat. I think I'm going to wait just a few minutes because people are joining, and I know when I do it early, the people that join later can't see it in the chat. Actually, someone can remind me to do that at the end of the program. The sessions will all take place at 7 o'clock Pacific time, and I'm hoping to make them relatively brief. My goal is a half an hour. I have no idea how long they will last. I will provide a brief introduction, and then there's a series of videos that were created. I don't know if they were created specifically for this program, but I think they're a very nice professional treatment of the question of anti-Semitism. And then I am going to put my own 2 cents in, and that will consist of a penny before the video and 1 penny after the video. I will every evening send out a quick email to everyone who's registered. And now I think there's about 108, 110 of you that have registered with a link. So if you miss a session or want to share it with someone else, you can do so. The detailed plan, and I think in all my emails I've given you the schedule. Tonight, why is anti-Semitism still around? Tomorrow, whose fault is anti-Semitism? Is criticizing Israel anti-Semitic? Do Jews cause anti-Semitism? Is anti-Semitism still relevant? We'll skip Shabbat. And then the last evening program I'm going to have is, could a Holocaust happen again? And could it happen here? And then the community festival. And as I always acknowledge, I am here as a community rabbi for the Jewish Federation of Ventura County, and that's made possible by a grant by the Aronson family and the Affordable Living Choices Trust. And if you're looking for these materials and actually Zoom recordings of all the classes I teach, I have a website, just lotker.com. If you go to the website, there's a menu item for classes, and that will take you here. You go down just a little bit. You can download a PDF of the slides, so you don't have to scribble notes about the slides. And then I'll also have the recordings here. So before I begin, I want to do this quickly. I'm going to put up a poll. Let's see. Now I can't see where the poll. Oh, there it is. Okay. I am going to launch this poll, and Actually, I don't do this very often, so I'm not 100% sure how it works. But basically, the first question is I'm asking you to identify yourselves by faith tradition, and I have a lot of choices there. The second, and then there's the total of 6 questions. I think you can scroll down. Can somebody confirm that to me, that you have control?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is, this, I just want to get a quick, let's see. Yeah, I've launched the polls. So far, none of you have answered any questions. So I don't want to take a lot of time, but I'm hoping that you will.
I can scroll down the poll, but I don't see where to respond.
I think you probably, actually, I don't know, because.
Oh.
Abilatkar, I'm trying to submit, but it doesn't submit it in.
I don't know how to do it. So some people are doing it.
Worked for me. I don't know.
It's working.
You have to answer all 6 questions, otherwise you can't submit.
Okay, so just keep answering questions. Do the best you can. This is not going to be a crisis if it doesn't work perfectly, but it'll just give me a sense of how of where we are. So
Rabbi Lochter, my religion isn't listed there, so what should I say?
What is your religion?
Baha'i.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I put that in there. I will add it to my notes.
Thank you.
And I apologize for not putting it in. I actually had it in my handwritten version. I should have had an other. Okay, let's see. We are 43, and I think 26 of you have responded so far. Sorry? Okay. And the other thing I'm going to do is I am going to mute everyone. You can unmute yourselves if you want to say something. And although I can see many of you, if you do have a burning question, I think there will be a time for discussion in a little bit. So I'll ask you to finish up. And I know only 29 out of 43 of us.
Excuse me.
Yes.
The questionnaire went away.
It went away.
Yeah.
Did it go away for everybody?
Back. It suddenly came back, and it's got a bunch of stuff filled in that isn't me. Oh, that's the summary. Oh.
Okay, so
well,
I don't know. I'm not all that familiar.
I have not finished it. So
okay, so I'm just going to ask. For some reason, I seem to be stuck on 29, and I suspect that's not necessarily accurate. But I'm just going to make some notes to myself here.
The questions disappeared in my case as well.
I don't know what to tell you.
In mine too.
Okay. Well, God works in strange ways. And 29. So we'll have at least a sample of the answers. 11 and 18. And oh, I think I can share the results. 29. But I don't think it's going to stay up. 7 and 20. Okay, so I'm going to, I wonder if I can do this relaunch polls, download results. Oh, let's see if I can download results. God knows what will happen now. Okay, now I've lost all of you. Hang on. Okay, so I am sharing the results now, but I wouldn't worry about it. I'm going to read it off. On the faith traditions, I had 21 Jewish, 5 Catholic, 6 Protestant, and 1 Baha'i. Do you feel like you understand anti-Semitism? 19 of you say yes, 10 say no. Have you personally witnessed anti-Semitism? 20 of you have said yes, 9 say no. Have you personally experienced anti-Semitism directed at you? 11 yes, 18 no. Have you personally witnessed ethnic hatred? 20 yes, 9 no. Have you personally experienced ethnic hatred directed at you? 17 yes, 21 no. So this, I guess the main thing, and I'm sure you understand this, is this is not an academic undertaking. So here we go. I want to begin with a little bit of historical context for anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is the world's oldest hatred. Every nation, with the important exception of the United States, that has had a significant Jewish population, has at one time or another expelled their Jewish population. As we'll see in a moment, Jewish hatred is more than 3,000 years old, and it affects, in some cases, our ancestors, in other cases, us. And I often comment that my wife, Sonia, and my grandmother had the same experience. They both left their old countries at around age 14 or 15 and came to the United States not speaking English. And in my grandmother's case, I mean, she was completely dependent upon her brother who had come a few years before. In Sonia's case, Jewish organizations took her in and made it possible for Sonia and her brother to stay in Jewish homes in the New York area. So just some statistics. 57.5% of all religious motivated hate crimes last year were against Jews, who are only 2% of the US population. So it's something like 25 times the number that you would expect. 1 in 4 American Jews have been exposed to anti-Semitism. 90% of Jews think anti-Semitism is a problem today versus 60% of the general public. 31% of Jews feel less secure than a year ago. 91% of Jews believe the extreme political right is a threat. 71% of Jews believe the extreme political left is a threat. And 81% of Jews believe that the statement, Israel has no right to exist, is anti-Semitic. And a little more than the general public also believe that statement is anti-Semitic. So now I'm going to show a brief, I think a 6-minute or so video. The link is there. I wonder if I can. Well, anyway, the link is there, and it will be in the notes that you can download. So, Cheryl, give me a thumbs up if you can see the video, and more importantly, you can hear the video.
If you asked most Westerners today whether they oppose anti-Semitism, most would likely say yes. And yet, whenever something terrible happens in the world, it seems like it's only a matter of time before someone blames the Jews for it. No, seriously, those are all real. The problem is not just words. It's conspiracy theories that have deadly consequences, as massacres of Jews from Pittsburgh to Paris demonstrate.
At lunchtime today, a man armed with machine guns walked into this kosher supermarket and took more than a dozen people hostage.
The gunman was killed, but tragically so too were 4 of the hostages.
Far from fading away, anti-Jewish prejudice seems as resilient as ever. So if we agree that anti-Semitism is bad, why is it still such a big problem? That's where this series comes in. By answering some of the biggest questions about anti-Semitism, the sort that confuse many people and keep them from seeing and confronting the hate. We'll learn together how to effectively tackle anti-Semitism, what it actually is, how to recognize it, and what to do about it. Didn't anti-Semitism go away after the Holocaust?
Jews will not replace us!
Apparently not. Yet a surprising number of people think that anti-Jewish bigotry was stamped out after the horrors of Nazi Germany. After all, didn't we make a bunch of Holocaust movies and get past this stuff? But while it's comforting to imagine that anti-Semitism largely disappeared after World War II, it's far from accurate. And if we make the mistake of reducing anti-Semitism to the Holocaust, its most extreme manifestation, we're likely to miss much of the problem today. That's because the Holocaust wasn't an anti-Semitic exception. It was anti-Semitism's culmination. The systematic murder of 6 million Jews across Europe didn't happen in a vacuum. It came after years of religious, scientific, cultural, and political anti-Semitism. For centuries, European Jews were barred from most professions, forcibly converted to other faiths, and subjected to murderous rampages, constant expulsions, and periodic inquisitions. In other words, the mass murder of European Jewry would not have been possible without many centuries of anti-Jewish ideas and assumptions. Take the Holocaust away, and you still have this massive anti-Semitic foundation underneath. In fact, we are still living with it. Put another way, just as slavery's abolition in America didn't end racism, the defeat of Nazi Germany didn't end anti-Semitism. The statistics bear this out. According to the FBI, American Jews are annually subject to the most hate crimes of any religious group, despite making up only 2% of the US population. Not only that, but since the FBI began tracking these crimes, more of them have been committed against Jews than all these groups combined. Hate crime statistics are an imperfect metric, but they give you a sense of the ugly anti-Jewish undercurrent that has always lurked beneath the surface. Recently, more people have started to notice this unsettling reality, as American Jews have been subjected to a series of anti-Semitic terrorist attacks and massacres. These include the mass shooting at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue in October 2018.
Contact, shot fired.
The April 2019 attack on a synagogue in Poway, California. The shooting at a kosher supermarket in Jersey City, New Jersey in December 2019.
3 people inside that store were killed by flying pieces of metal during the gunfire.
There is no question that this is a hate crime, and anti-Semitism should be called out aggressively and firmly, immediately, for what it is.
And the mass stabbing of religious Jews at their Hanukkah celebration that same month by a machete-wielding assailant in Muncie, New York. Yet as bad as this is, the picture is considerably darker in Europe. In 2018, CNN surveyed European attitudes towards Jewish people. They found that more than a quarter of Europeans believe that Jews have too much influence in finance. Nearly 1 in 4 said that Jews had too much influence in wars and conflicts around the world. 1 in 5 Europeans said that Jews had too much influence in the media, and almost the same number claimed that they have too much influence in politics. These conspiracy theories about vast Jewish power are particularly ludicrous when you realize that Jews constitute less than 0.2% of the entire European population. And most Europeans have never even met one. The consequences of this widespread hostility towards Jews, however, are severe. In 2013 and 2018, researchers at the European Union's Agency for Fundamental Rights asked Jews about their experiences of anti-Semitism. What they found was alarming. Nearly 40% of European Jews were afraid of publicly identifying as Jewish. Nearly half were worried about being the victim of anti-Semitic harassment in the next 12 months. And 1/3 feared being the victim of a physical assault. And for good reason. In recent years, Jews have been the victims of brutal anti-Semitic attacks at schools and synagogues across Europe. Put together, it's easy to understand why so many of Europe's Jews still live in fear 75 years after the Holocaust, why nearly 40% of them say they've considered leaving because they don't feel safe, and why millions of them already have. The same is true in many non-Western countries. Jews in Arab and Muslim lands once numbered nearly 1 million, but now number only a few thousand, having been persecuted to the point of expulsion or flight in the last century. And anti-Jewish prejudice has persisted throughout the region, even in the absence of Jews. Why does this matter to us? Because if we only see and confront anti-Semitism when it looks like the Holocaust or is committed by obvious actors like neo-Nazis, we're likely to miss much of it. Which means that society will only notice the problem when it explodes into deadly violence, as in Pittsburgh or Paris, and it's already too late. Instead, we should understand the Holocaust as a cautionary tale for what happens when more common outgrowths of anti-Semitism go unchecked, and resolve to beat those back together. As for how to do that, well, first we need to settle the biggest question about anti-Semitism of all. Whose fault is anti-Semitism?
Okay, so I'm going to add some of my own comments, and then I will invite your comments, and you can post things in the chat. I think since everybody is here, I am going to post, I need to do this to everyone. I am going to post what I think. Yeah, well, hang on, I need to fix this. So here is, this very long thing is a link to get into this program. So if you for some reason need a copy of that link, you can copy it from the chat. So again, I mentioned as we began that anti-Semitism is the world's oldest hatred. And it's, I think, important to understand how far back this goes. Many people think that it's just a Christian thing or a left wing or a right wing thing. But the holiday of Passover that we'll be celebrating next spring is again founded on anti-Semitism. It's an Egyptian mistrust and enslavements of the Israelites. So that's well over 3,000 years ago. The holiday we're celebrating tonight, that it reminds me of the old joke, which I suspect at least all the Jews here have heard. Every Jewish holiday can be summarized by a simple phrase. They tried to kill us. They didn't. Let's eat. That may sound a little silly, but think about the fact that every one of our holidays, for one degree or another, revolves around this theme, most of our holidays. So the holiday that we celebrate this evening, the Hanukkah revolt, was against Greek Syrian anti-Semitism, again, well over 2,000 years ago. And I published a little note on Facebook today pointing out that had that revolt not succeeded, not only wouldn't we have Hanukkah candles to light, but Christianity may well have never had a chance to get started. Because if Judaism had been wiped out by the Greek Syrians, which was the goal, almost 200 years before the birth of Jesus, I'll let theologians, Christian theologians, figure out what might the result be. But from a historical point of view, Jesus would have been born at a time when people would not be talking about the Jewish Messiah. And by the same token, as I posted also today, the knowledge of Hanukkah in the books of Maccabees was preserved by the Christian church and not by the rabbis in our own Bible. So moving ahead into the Common Era, in the year 66, there was a revolt against Rome, and the Jews were decimated in that revolt. It really was another Holocaust between the revolt, the so-called Great Revolt against Rome, and the Bar Kokhba revolt. Something like a third of Jews were murdered. And I'm going to talk about this, I can't remember if it's later tonight or I think in one of the subsequent programs. At that time, the Jews basically made a deal with Rome and with the world. And here was the deal. We are going to stay way, 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 I don't know how far my line will go, way back here in the corner. And we're going to have our own little religion. And we're going to study our own books, and we'll have our own language, and we'll have our own legal system, and we're not going to bother you. Don't bother us. We're not going to have a king. We're not going to have an army. We're not even going to have a land. We are going to be a people without a land. And that was the deal for almost 2,000 years of the Jews with the world, until, as we'll see, in the last century, basically Jews decided that it was not ethical, that it was not godly to allow yourselves to be periodically slaughtered. So the rise of Zionism takes place, and the Jews' insistence on having our own land. The Crusades were fought by Christians wanting to seize the Holy Land from the Muslims, but when they marched through towns that had Jews, the attitude was, well, we don't have to go to Israel to find infidels. We have infidels right here. And so there were massacres throughout Europe. Most of us are familiar with the expulsion from Spain in 1492. And that, my wife's family moved from Spain to Morocco at that time. But massacres that sound a lot like when you read the history of the Nazi massacres, the HANUKKAH massacres in Poland in the 1600s, Eastern European pogroms, which account for many of our ancestors being here, taking place, 100 to 200 years ago, and of course the Holocaust or the Shoah, and the kinds of headlines and videos that you saw to this day. So I'm heavily influenced, and I'll show you the book in a moment, a book called Why the Jews, the Reason for Anti-Semitism. And I'm going to ask for your thoughts so you can start thinking about them. Why do you think anti-Semitism exists? But I'm I think there's a very important case to be made that the reason for anti-Semitism is Judaism. Judaism and its teachings cause problems to people in the world, and different problems to different peoples. And I'll summarize them a little bit here, and we'll get into it in more detail in later classes. But basically, those of you that have studied with me, and I'm in the midst of teaching a class called Jewish Literacy, go to my website if you're interested in it, that the foundation, Judaism sits kind of on a three-legged stool, on three major pillars. And those pillars is God, Torah, and Israel. And those are important Jewish thoughts and teachings. So in terms of God, Judaism teaches that there is only one God, the God revealed in the Hebrew Bible. And so specifically, as we'll see later on in the New Testament, the Jews rejected the New Testament. Then, of course, the teachings in the New Testament are taught in the name of the Old Testament, and Jews come along and saying, no, 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 we read the Old Testament, we read the Hebrew Bible in the original, and we don't see any of these predictions of Jesus in the Bible, and God is one and not three, and God doesn't take on human form. So that teaching becomes a problem, a theological problem for Christianity. Muslims, similar idea. Muhammad proclaims the Quran, or if you're a Muslim, the angel Gabriel proclaims the Quran to Muhammad, and there's a whole set of additional teachings which are incompatible with Judaism, and we'll see some of them. And the Muslims could not tolerate the Jews' rejection of Islam. Nazis and communists, and even the Western Enlightenment Nazis and communists could not tolerate God-based ethics and values. The idea that even if there's a majority, even if the Nazis rule the land and murder of people is legal because of the laws of the land, it's still wrong, and we won't tolerate it. The other leg, and the second leg of Judaism, is Torah and Jewish law. And there are elements that arise out of Jews observing Jewish law, which lead to anti-Semitism. The Jews stay separate, even in the Purim Megillah, in the Megillat Esther, the scroll of Esther, Haman describes the Jews as a certain people living amongst the majority. Our dietary laws, our Sabbath laws keep us separate from the community. There is emphasis in Judaism on education. In fact, in the Talmud, when Jews move to a new land, to a new town, you have an obligation to build a school before you build a synagogue. And a school has a higher level of sanctity than a synagogue. A synagogue can be turned into a school, but a school cannot be turned into a synagogue because you can't reduce the sanctity of the school even into a synagogue. And this results in Jewish success, the emphasis on learning. These laws have health implications. There's laws about washing and how you slaughter animals and so on. And we Jews do not have the right to remain silent. We have an affirmative obligation to teach these values to society and not to remain apart and disconnected from society in the way that the Amish are. The third leg of Judaism is Israel and Jewish peoplehood. Judaism has always held that we are not simply a religion, we are a nation. And I always comment on this, we're the only surviving example of a time when your nationality and your religion were one and the same. In ancient times, if you were Greek, you worship Greek gods. If you were Egyptian, you worship Egyptian gods, and so on. Israelites worship the Israelite God. So our national component is always a very important part of Judaism. And today, the anti-Semitism of the left, and as you'll see in Voltaire and the Western Enlightenment, is often directed against that element of Judaism. And of course, the element of Judaism that says we, a nation like other nations, have a right to have a land like other nations. So these days, and we'll see this in some of the other videos, it's not okay to be anti-Semitic after the Holocaust. Anti-Semitism, thank God, has gotten a bad name. So quite often what we hear are people saying, I'm not anti-Semitic, I am anti-Zionist. But anti-Zionism is the same as anti-Semitism. We will discuss in later discussions and later videos, it is okay, it is kosher to be opposed to the politics of Israel, to be opposed to the government of Israel, just as you can be a patriotic American and oppose whatever president or government is in power in this country, it is perfectly reasonable to be opposed to the policies of Israel. As we will see, it is not okay to deny Israel the right to exist. The book I mentioned, which I found very helpful, and as some of you know, I wrote my own book, actually for Christians, about Judaism, and this book by Joseph Telushkin and Dennis Prager, called Why the Jews, helped me quite a bit in understanding this. So what I'd like to do now is, I think this is, okay, I'm going to back up one. I'd like to ask you, anyone that would like to comment. I can actually see everyone unless you've got your video out, but it's helpful if you raise your electronic hand, but if you raise your hands wildly, I will see you. So one of the goals here is to have something of a discussion. It's a little awkward. There are now 43 of us to have a discussion amongst 43. I think I'm going to stop sharing. So I think that'll help you see each other a little better. So, but I'll ask if anyone would like to offer a comment on what you think the reasons are. Shlomo, I don't know if you're raising your hand or not.
I am.
Okay.
I am.
Go ahead.
Is this just for any group that wants to be different, stands back, and does not go along with the majority around them, implying that we're better than you, or we know more than you, or whatever, but just whatever group stands back and chooses to be different, it's seen as an implicit criticism?
I would say other people can comment. This actually is supposed to be a discussion. I would say there is truth in that. I would say part of it is tribal in a very DNA sense of the word. Back in the hunter-gatherer stage, you had to guard yourself against invasions from other folks that may not look like you, that may not speak your language, that may not have the same customs. And I think that's literally built into our DNA, is mistrust of the other. Other comments? Robin posts in chat, Robin Fagan, the example of the Amish, they are apart, but I'm not aware of anti-Amish sentiment, maybe because they are so far apart. Good point. Anybody else like to offer a comment? Jay. You're muted.
No. Okay. The books that I have read claim that the reason that the Holocaust, the wipeout of the Jews in Germany, was caused basically because the Jewish population as a whole, even though it was individual basis, was very successful in business, in finance, even in some sense of government. And this disturbed Hitler. If you go back to Egypt, we just read where the Pharaoh was all upset because the Jewish people, these Israelites, were regenerating.
We're growing.
We're growing. It's such a huge amount, so fast that he was afraid that they were going to take over that country. The majority, in my picture, I see anti-Semitism as a form of jealousy of what we have. But what we have, I like to feel, we have earned.
So I would say, I would respond and other people can respond. Certainly poor Jews in Poland and other places were also put to death in the Holocaust.
Yes.
And, the Chmielnicki massacres were also Polish Jews. These were not successful Jews. I would say all of these items are part of the reason, but they're pretext. What I think the thesis of these videos will be, and a thesis that makes sense to me, is there is Jew hatred for many reasons. Bruce just posted something in chat about blaming Jews for the killing of Jesus. these are pretexts and reasons. Different people have different reasons for hating the Jews. But poor Jews are hated, rich Jews are hated, educated Jews are hated, uneducated Jews are hated, successful, unsuccessful. Even in the case of Nazi Germany, even if you completely assimilated and were, medal winning, good German citizens that fought for Germany, sorry, in World War I, they were sent to the camps. So I would say that's absolutely part of the reason, but it can't simply be explained by that reason. Others, Netta, my cousin.
Michael, I'm sorry. I think you touched on it in the very beginning. Number one is that those two other religions were actually an offshoot of the Jewish religion, both Christianity and Muslims and the Islamic faith. And I think, in order to become a international, so to speak, international faith for Christianity and for Islam, they needed to train their people at something to actually get away from Judaism. And one of the ways to do that was like everybody else has, is hatred. This is something that was instilled in them in order to become, for the Jews become individualistic, but rather for the Christian faith and for the Islamic faith to be apart from the original teaching.
Sorry.
And in order to do that, they inflicted all of those horrific things on the Jewish people. And it won't stop because of it, because they're still sticking to their original teaching, whether because the Jews killed Jesus and the Islam Miguel's. And that's
okay,
what
let me comment. First, technically, Christianity does see itself as a fulfillment or an offshoot of Judaism. Right. So Judaism is a particular problem for Christianity. Right. Because simple Jewish existence is in conflict with the universality of Christian teaching. Right. I would say, and it's very important to understand, that most Christian churches, not all, but most Christian churches, including the Catholic Church, which itself is half of the Christians in the world, have absolutely rejected the theology behind that hatred, the idea of supersessionism. What individual Christians believe is their own business, but what I can tell you is, my book was published by a Christian publisher. I speak to more Christians than Jews. I'm invited into churches all the time. And I can tell you that most Christians I know, including some of the people on the screen in front of you, absolutely reject that idea. Islam technically doesn't see itself as deriving from Judaism. I think historically, there's a lot of truth in that. But once again, what we will see in many cases is a prophet comes along, whether it's an early church father, whether it's Muhammad, whether it's Martin Luther, comes along and says, I now have the truth. And once the Jews hear my truth, they will all reject Judaism and come over to us. The fact that we don't is testimony to the fact that we don't see truth in those teachings. People have in the chat have mentioned scapegoating, blaming the Jews for social problems, and again, it's absolutely a point. But one of the things that we're actually going to see, people talk about the idea that Hitler used Jew hatred to build support for the Nazis to get the ability to win the war. One of the things we'll see on the last night, there were actually cases where it seems pretty clear the Nazis were more concerned about murdering Jews than even winning the war. Vern, I think there is always a need to find someone who is different to galvanize people to their political, social, and economic goals. I think, again, I think this is sort of a tribal element. I think at the heart of Judaism is the idea that we are all members of one tribe. The tribe is people created in God's image. And ultimately, Judaism doesn't teach, as I think many of you know, maybe all of you don't know, Judaism doesn't teach that everyone should be Jewish. As one of my rabbis taught me, Judaism is the one true religion for Jews. No one will come knocking on your door with the good news about Moses. Judaism doesn't seek converts, but it does have as a goal the idea of teaching the world about the God of Abraham. And as I always point out, if we count God's batting average by how many Jews there are in the world, God is batting 2. There's 0.2% of the world is Jewish. If we count God's batting average by how many people worship the God of Abraham, that number is about 50%. God's batting 500 there. And I think the goal of Judaism is to bring the world to knowledge of and worship of the God of Abraham. Any other comments before I talk about the final program that's going to take place a week from Jay? You have your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah. When you talk about anti-Semitism, Rabbi, I think about today. I really, you've heard me before. I'm really not into Abraham and Jacob and that group. I'm into today's group. Would you explain to me the guy who goes down and shoots the Pittsburgh synagogue? Would you explain to me the guy who went to, what was it, North Carolina or South Carolina, the Carolinas, and wanted to exterminate all the Jews? Those were young people. They didn't even know who the hell, I'm sure they don't know who Jacob and Joseph and Abraham are.
Well, if they're motivated by Christian or if they're motivated,
what motivates them?
Yes. So I think what motivates them is being raised in a culture of the last 2,000 years of Jew hatred. They grow up in a community where Jewish epithets are used. People will talk about Jewing someone down as a euphemism for negotiating. People will say Jews are greedy, Jews are miserly, Jews are only interested in money. The phrase, we heard in politics, it's all about the Benjamins, that Jews really control the banking system. They grow up in a world where they come to believe that society's ills and the reason they aren't doing better is because of others, and Jews are a convenient and present target. Politicians will succeed by blaming Muslims. Politicians will succeed by blaming people who want to get vaccinated. Politicians will succeed by blaming people for all kinds of things. So I think part of it is the idea of scapegoating. Anyone else like to offer a comment before I move to wrap this up? Vern, you need to unmute yourself.
With regard to the Amish, they obviously haven't suffered from the same level of problems. But I grew up in an area where there was a Mennonite community.
Mm-hmm.
And they stood off by themselves and were very successful at what they did because they could work together much more cooperatively than the population around them.
Mm-hmm.
And that created a really unique animosity, especially of people who lived very much adjacent to them. I think part of it we don't hear about the Amish so much is because they're such a small group and they tend to be concentrated in small areas.
Yes, and I think that was the point I was trying to make, that Jews have an obligation to be present in society to teach about the God of Abraham. That's why I always have mixed feelings when people want to post the 10 Commandments. In the name of religious freedom, I don't think we should give preference to the 10 Commandments as being, a Jewish Christian construct. But on the other hand, our job is to teach the world about the Ten Commandments and about the God of Abraham. So I am sometimes torn about that. Joy, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah. You talk about the Amish, and I don't know if any of you remember, was it that many years ago that a gunman did get into an Amish community, I think it was in Ohio, and killed a number of people. And the entire community did not hate anybody. In fact, they brought in people to talk to them, and they sent people out, and they forgave this dastardly deed. It wasn't near as many, and that's about the only time that it happened, I think.
Yeah.
But it was notable at the time to me.
Yeah, thank you for reminding us that. Devora.
I would like to say something. My name is Sam Levy. Good evening to every one of you. I see it, if you look in history, the Jewish people do not resist when somebody jump on them. The psychologists say we weak before the strong and strong before the weak. We always find somebody weaker than us to jump on him. And like the kick the dog syndrome. When my boss is gonna scream at me, I'm coming home. My dog, happy to see me, instead to greet him, okay, kick him and said, "Move away! You block my door to go into the house." So this.
Yeah. So I agree with you, and I think part of this is what I called the deal made at Yavna after the revolt against Rome. Basically, Jews gave up the idea of having an army and of protecting ourselves. And the idea would be, we'll live peaceably among you in our own little communities. We're not going to bother you. In European, in feudal times, Jews were taxed as a separate nation, a separate community living in other nations. From Bar Kokhba to 1948, there were no Jewish generals. There was no Jewish army. And so what happens with the rise of anti-Semitism is the realization that it's immoral to allow your wives and children and yourself to be slaughtered without putting up a fight. Now, there were revolts. There's the Warsaw Uprising. There were uprisings all along, but as a national ethic of creating an army and creating a defense force to protect ourselves as a people, that really didn't exist from the time of the Romans until Zionism. And the model, of course, is the Maccabees. That's what we're celebrating tonight, right? The victory of the fewer Jews against the overwhelming odds due to superior planning and guerrilla tactics and God's help. It's important that the books of the Maccabees are not in the Hebrew Bible. Why are they not in the Hebrew Bible? Because the rabbis in the Talmudic era, having suffered horrible defeats from Rome, did not want to spur the Jews on to imitate the Maccabees, because we saw what happened when they tried that against Rome. With the rise of Zionism, you have this glorification, appropriately so, of the Maccabees. We have the Maccabea games. We have, the Maccabees are our heroes, but it is a change that took thousands of years. Vafa.
Rabbi Lofter, you say that it's the obligation of Jews to teach the God of Abraham. Can you expand on that? What are the implications of that for society?
So what I would say is, the obligations for society, I'm not sure. But
no, not the obligation for society. What are the implications of that?
The implications are that we are not permitted to be silent about our Judaism. We have an obligation to teach the world the truth that there is one God, and that God's primary demand is ethical behavior, and that the world need not become Jewish. We're not out there to convert the world to become Jewish, but we are out there to remind the world that ethical behavior, the sanctity of life, how God wants us to treat one another, is not something we are allowed to be silent about. So when tyrants arise, whether they're from the time of the Maccabees to Haman, to Hitler, to Stalin, to Pol Pot, to Gaddafi, in every generation, when these tyrants arise, Jews have an affirmative obligation to not be silent and to be an or lagoyim, a light to the nations. That's our job in the world, particularly appropriate, in the context of Hanukkah and the Shine a Light program on anti-Semitism. Our obligation is to shine a light. I'll show in a later class Martin Niemöller's famous quote. They came for the union organizers, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a union organizer. And they came for this, and I didn't say anything. And they came for the Jews, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew. And they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So Jews have this obligation. We are like the alarm clock of the world to remind the world when things are going bad. Sometimes we're called the canary in the coal mine. And nobody likes their alarm clock. Nobody likes to be reminded of their ethical obligations. It is almost 8 o'clock. I am going to finish sharing the screen because I want to at least mention, so you can put in your planning. Next Sunday, a week from tonight, those of you in Southern California, there's going to be a program open to Jews, non-Jews, at the Collection River Park and of the Oxnard Boulevard exit of the 101 freeway, starting at 2:30 p.m. There will be children's activities, crafts, boutiques, entertainment, and gifts. It's free, open to all, and I hope to see many of you at that time. Next week, we are going to be discussing the question, whose fault is anti-Semitism? So I am going to stop the recording.